again. This is Noah Fredericks. For those of you who have been so kind as to follow this far through our tirades and discussions and research into the ancient antiquities, it's hard to believe this is tape number 74, and I've entitled it The Vanquished of Mu. I deliberated on whether to call it that or Mu's Aborted Sons. Now, the trouble with the white man, the Anglo-Saxon, he's so easily led around, so it seems, by the nose, or else he can't add. Because as we look back, we read the Scriptures, the Bible is basically a diary about one man and his family. And as we go and research into this, and I think we've made it quite evident that the black man, the Negroid, and the Asiatic type man, there's evidence that he's preceded the Anglo-Saxon kindred white Adamic man. He preceded them here, if not by tens of thousands, possibly by hundreds of thousands. As we go back, we've cited before by many of the would-be experts that it seems like the civilization mentioned called Mu is one of, if not the oldest civilization here upon the earth, and we can't help become suspicious because we find when the Eternal, this great Lord of space, who spoke to his friend Abraham, and he said, "Now Abraham, my friend," and then one of the main things that he reminded him, he says, "Remember, thou art a stranger and a pilgrim on the earth, on this earth." Now, a stranger not only means somebody foreign or strange from another land, or in this case, another world. It's talking about, you might go look it up in the concordance, there's many different ancient words there used, one like knockery, meaning you're not of this race or of these people that are presently indigenous to this globe or this world. Now, to recap just a little bit what we said in our last tape, we noticed that these ancient people of Mu, that they referred to the Golden City. And we find a very comparable statement by St. John, who, under the divine messenger, well, that's the Hebrew, extraterrestrial messenger, or as the Greeks call him, an angel, that was sent directly by the one called himself Yahshua the Messiah, or the Christed one. We find that John, and I think we've proved that adequately, that he was shown and taken and directed and guided to this new heaven or new area of space, which he had not seen or had been in. And he was shown there the holy city. He was shown and conducted on a tour of the throne of God, the New Jerusalem, that place where it says inside of it, it had no need of the light of the sun nor the moon, for it says that the Christ was the light thereof. We know he wasn't sitting there playing a little glowworm, that due to his technology and engineering and science, that he was the one that kept this great space station. Now remember, Ecclesiasticus, nothing new under the sun, no, not one, that he was responsible for keeping it in condition and rotating and following around the sun, orbiting, shall we say, just like our earth. Now, I've had some people get all bent out of shape, and they write to me and they say, "Why does God need a spaceship? Why does he need a space station?" Well, my friends, when you go to visit with him, or all these souls that are talking about going back to heaven, and they read the example of Christ, who half of the real Christians, we're not talking about these pseudo would-be, well, as William Branham said many decades ago, he said there's three types of believers. There's believers, unbelievers, and make-believers. And I let every person judge for himself as to who he is and where he is and what slot he actually fits into. But unfortunately, we have so many people who are constantly trying to put us in a slot where they think that we belong. But as you notice, he ate the bread and fish, and he said, did you ever see a ghost eat bread or fish, depending on which translation you're reading? And they said that they stood there, the people of the city, they watched him ascend into the heavens in a cloud, and we've explained that is talking about a type of spaceship, that all of the great armies of heaven under the divine guidance of Michael, the great archangel, that Daniel the 12th chapter said once again he would stand up for the children of God. And so we know that this Christ, this God incarnate, is a very real person, and we've pointed out in times past that the prophets and the men of old, they said, I shall again see him in my flesh with these eyes, that he would see him with eyes and in a flesh incarnate body. But this time we're talking about overcoming death and putting on immortality. But so many people would invoke upon us the understanding of a spiritual, ethereal body. Well, anyway, we will leave it at that. So, you see, when the people of Mu, they referred to this golden city, like John told us all about, and we gave you all the different names from the book of Revelation. But we find John, he did say how the streets appeared to be paved with gold and all of that. Now, it was most likely some sort of like, we would say, aluminum or steel. It was some type of sophisticated, advanced material that he was not able to describe it except by the highways being made of a material or a substance that looked like gold. And so we find we go back into the ancient days of antiquity, and as I think I mentioned in the other tape, let's see, we referred back to the Genesis here, and the very first page, very first chapter, I mean to say, second verse, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, he was not giving us a weather report. He's talking about the races and the day and the ancient peoples, and he's talking about a vehicle that moved. And it is, shall we say, sort of like a time machine, that he's taken us back into the remotest days of antiquity, and we cannot exactly be sure which world that he's referring to. Now, before we get into that, allow me to point something out to you. I spend a great deal of time in these little bookstores, and I ran across a little pamphlet of, I would say, approximately 30 pages. And it's put out by the Southwest Radio Church in Oklahoma City. Now, over here where I live, I don't have time, even if I were able to pick up radio stations. Now, I would like to have got a hold of this radio station. I've picked up several of their little booklets. They come out with some pretty terrific, outstanding ideas and things for as far as they go with them. So I don't know whether they fail to go all the way due to ignorance or because they're afraid to. Now, when you don't understand who that Bible belongs to, that is talking about the Adon, meaning to be of a red, ruddy complexion, to show anger in the face when, or red in the face when angered, and it talks about those that are able to blush, and it speaks of those who are not able to blush. And so we all agree, most of the WASPs, as they call them, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Now, this is not, please don't write me and say, oh my God, he's full of hate, he hates other races and all. I'm just trying to point out a fact that is pointed out in the Bible. Now, later on, these Adamic people, they became Hebrews and they became Israelites, and they went through 37 chapters of the Bible before this word Jew popped up, and it confused the people. But anyway, we go back, most all of the uh, folks that attend the Protestant churches and even the Catholic churches, where they say, yes, I came from Adam. And I ask most of them, did you ever ask your preacher, your priest, where did the Gentiles come from? And who are the Gentiles? And I point out a lot of embarrassing scriptures where it says, quoting the Almighty, He said, I gave you the heathen as an inheritance. Take them and rule over them with righteousness. I said, now if you, white Anglo-Saxon Christians, if you are truly the chosen of God, if you are those of the Adamic household who had failed so miserably and so terribly bad that Christ Himself had to come back and intervene, and that's why He was called the second Adam, because you're a descendant of people that has come piled one historical failure up on top of the other one, because they said there's none so blind as those who have eyes and yet cannot see. And so this is a failure to see, a failure to understand. Now, getting back to this, if I may quote from this book, it was written quite some time ago. It was copyrighted here in 1978, but I think if I can point out an article in here and make use of it, quote in part, and the law says that I have the right to within reason. And on one of the last pages here, I think he was ballyhooing one of the next books he was to come out with, just like I do. It says a new book by Emil Gaverlik. And it gives you all his degrees. He's got a PhD, he's got an ED, D here, and he has quite an interesting picture. It shows a couple of fingers in outer space is holding a little throne or something, as best I can make out. And it's entitled The New Jerusalem. And I can't hardly read it, so small. It's Synchronous orbit high over the old Jerusalem on earth. Well, right away he's gone wrong again. He's gone awry. He's failed to understand that there's a heavenly Jerusalem, the very one which John visited and which the ancient people of Mu called the Golden City. It's been called the Garden of Eden. It was called the House of Life by the ancient Egyptians. And it was in the high hallowed halls of paradise, the House of Eden, like Odin, Woden, that the Vikings and the ancient Norsemen spoke of, where they had glimmers and the dark shadows of their memory going back to antiquity, just like we covered King Arthur, and it was Arthur, and those that come from the house of Thor. And we have tried to clear up these misnomers in history and in ancient antiquity and bring some semblance of understanding back to the lost, wandering sheep. Now, one of the next points this preacher makes, he says, there is something wrong with the universe. Well, that's quite an incredulous statement. I wouldn't say that there was anything wrong with the universe, just some of the jerks that are floating around in it. But he goes on to say, Job knew this in the very dim past, and so did David. I think we've pointed out quite adequately in foregoing chapters or tapes or lectures, if you like, where King David had the pleasure to go like Moses and others, be taken up to the very throne of God like John. How else did he have such faith, and how was he saved from his enemies? And we know that Job went there too, but we find, as we've pointed out in times past, we've got to quit this thinking in the singular and know and understand that Job is speaking of a people, a particular, peculiar, as the Bible says, meaning a very special type of people. And so when you read Job, keep it in mind that it's the most exciting, most interesting, longest parable and idiom in the whole Bible. And it tells of ancient antiquities and time in the dim past. It's an older book than the book of Genesis or any other book in this world. And as we have pointed out, and I believe within my mind, without the shadow of a doubt, that Moses brought the book of Job, the written records and history and antiquity of these ancient people, as I pointed out, where Job meant Jah-Shub-Halem, the sons of Yah who came in the Shub ships. That was to vex the Egyptians, those who, at that time and point and period of antiquity, that they worshipped Horus. And the enemy of Horus was Seth, the Sethites, and they called him Evil Seth. But anyway, as we continue on in number 2, he says, what happened to the universe? Ezekiel 28, Isaiah 14 are two principal sources of information to show that a stupendous space war took place. And I believe in our other tapes we've covered that quite adequately. And Ezekiel 28 there, and he talks about this greedy hybrid bastard, if you would, this intergalactic Simon Legree that floated and toted throughout the universe, stealing all the gold and silver and jewels and platinum, and lists of different things. And it tells about this particular infamous personage, that he was the head of apparently several worlds and vast armies, and he was described, it says, as he was created in the beginning, in other words, transported by the Almighty, and he was the guardian of the very throne, this mysterious Eden, which was the headquarters of the trees of the Garden of Eden. We've pointed that out in Isaiah 14. We showed how art thou fallen from heaven, O thou sonny of the morning star, Lucifer, one and the same. So there was a mystery that we, I believe, tried and did adequately clear up and straighten out, a mystery that has been hidden caused great confusion for centuries to the whole world, all right? But you see, I think that it was a clever ruse that was brought about in order to confuse the world, and if the adversary had his opportunity to do so, remember, he is patient, just as the Oriental is patient. They don't care if it takes centuries. They have a goal set out. And if they can swing this all the way around the spectrum, that they would identify the white, Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, Nordic, Aryan, Teutonic, Lombardic, Germanic, Basque, and kindred Adamites, that they could associate them with Lucifer, and Lucifer being synonymous with Satan and the devil, and show that then they were the progeny and the offspring of the devil himself, if you please. All right, allow me to continue on now. He goes on to the friends once again. Allow me, now those of you who have a photographic memory, please forgive me. But most of us are not blessed with such a thing. But as we go back to Genesis, without getting into all of that, I can think of 1,000 different subjects and things that would correlate and relate to all of this I would like to bring out, but yet I like to keep it down to where the average person with no real depth in his background due to the suppression of religiosity or just not being brought up in his family or in his circle of life. But we have to understand that this Almighty tries to point out that somewhere we can no longer trust the Bible translators and their chronology and their dates. But we go back, as we pointed out in the book of Daniel, it talks about the cities of Adam, and it talks about the cities of Eve. Now, and also we pointed out the great long parable of Job, and it talked about his 7 sons, talked about his 3 daughters, and it spoke of his wife. Now, was his wife that he was referring to, was this Kaveh? Was this possibly Mu? Was it Mars? We don't know. Maybe somehow, somewhere, as we go along, and I think if you'll bear with me, we've got some great evidence here that we need to examine, and I will leave the conclusion of it to you. But we find out that in antiquity, that this family of Job, it talked about the brothers, those of the brethren, kinfolk. They were visiting the house of their sisters, smaller worlds, lesser worlds, idiom-wise and allegorically. And they talked about they were keeping feast days, which I believe somehow or other it was some sort of religious high holy day that they had to keep down through the eons, that was to remind them of their history and who they were and why they were keeping it, because of some epic ancient hero of antiquity who had saved them from the great dragon, so to speak, and so they wouldn't go awry or go astray from the dictates and the teachings of their elders and their forebears. Just like the Vikings and the Chinese, who were accused of being ancestral worshippers. Well, if you don't know who you are and you have no history, my friend, most likely you'll have no future. But we find that in Job there, it was reported back to him by a messenger that one of his sons was totally destroyed, and his land and his possessions and his family. I think that just like the ancient Greek tales that talked about the wars of space and the gods of space, this didn't come out of the minds of somebody with a fertile imagination. It came out of reality. And it was so far-fetched for those who digressed and allowed themselves to be taken down into a primitive society that borderline on the caveman. No. My friends, this was very, very real. And how in God's name, in this day and age and space age, can we remain so ignorant? So we go back here, and I want to say it again. The Garden of who? It says Eden. New Testament and Christ referred to it as paradise. Now we've heard of paradise lost. All right? Now, it seems that the old dragon, the old serpent, the old devil, the one called Satan, I'm quoting from Revelation, that, as we said just a little while ago, that he was one of the covering cherubims. He was one of the very protectors of the household of the Almighty. That where in such a fierce, awesome time, it talked about the wounding of the bull. That Venus, a satellite that we maintain and we take from Job, the 38th chapter, where he says that it was disguised with an overcoat of clay. Hey, this is so, I know that this will give you mental indigestion. My friends, I won't even end up with enough people out there who I could count on one hand who are not fugitives from the funny farm, or some, let's see, as the world would probably describe them as some spaced out New Ager who was crossbred with a UFO kook. I look at it myself, I can see where it's hard to understand, but you see, this headquarters of the Almighty, Eden, paradise, who had a garden out there, the trees, family trees, these planets, and the Almighty said, you can go and take and freely eat. You can take of all of these trees that you see that are good for fruit and so forth. It was an old idiom, an allegory, meaning you could breed with them, you could marry with them. But Adam and Eve, now we're talking about the cities of Adam and the cities of Eve, who Farrar Fenton describes as cities, and I'm sure that he thought that they were contained here upon the earth but I believe that these cities of Adam and cities of Eve was referring to planets and worlds that are mentioned in the book of Job. I really believe that. But the tree of knowledge of good and evil, this has been glossed over. It's become so confusing to us. We're talking about a family tree because where these cities and these people were told, if you take of this, you're going to die. In other words, your seed will die. If you start out breeding sons of God, we'll call them collie dogs, and you turn around and you crossbreed them with boxers or Pekingese, then, honey, don't take your dog back to the dog show and say, I'd like to show my collies. They're not collies, they're not boxers, they're not Pekingese. Who knows what they are? They're just a dog. Well, anyway, let's go back and, let's see, I've made 2 or 3 little notes. All right, let's just skip all this, get down to business, and get back here to some of the symbolism that I wanted to point out that comes out of this Mu. Yes, I remember one point now that I was going to make myself a note on. I didn't. Remember in our last tape we spoke of Mu vanishing. The ancient writers tell us that it vanished in fire and in water. Now today, the people, especially archaeologists and all that have no depth in biblical and overall background of all of the races and the nations, because some of us become so narrow-minded, say, I don't want to hear anything about the black civilizations. I don't want to hear nothing about the Tahitians. I'm not interested in the Asiatics, and I'm not interested in this people or that people. I just want to study the history of my people. Well, see, this is very silly. I like to keep an open mind. I want to know about all the other races and the other peoples, because the more I check, I find down through the days of history in this great antiquity that all of these races continuously, not only in the as we pointed out before, in intergalactically, they became they crossed each other's paths and did business and commerce and whatever continuously. But we find it here on earth, and we find back in the ancient records of antiquity that there was even an ancient king called Tidal. And they've often thought here that when great tidal waves that were caused by what I believe were ancient atomic fires that I mentioned from the great sagas of India and ancient evidence of Mu, that the show that all of the different things that went on, and we all had a common headquarters, all of these other planets, and so each one of them wants to claim that he's the rightful heir. But what I was going to say is, in that last tape, where the historians talked about this ancient civilizations of Mu, they found it in the records that they were destroyed by fire and water and great tidal waves. But what caused them? And so we find that all the races and the cultures and the religions, they all claim descent of the great golden cities. And as we go back and we further research into this, they talk about in the great days of antiquity that there was approximately 63 million people, they believed, what lived upon this lost continent of Mu over 200,000 years ago. Now, then they go say 50,000 years ago, the civilization that disappeared between the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Now, you can assume all of this, but right away, this is all they have here is an assumption. First of all, they can't prove to me beyond the shadow of a doubt that it was out there, because it's easy to claim that it's there, because nobody can find the evidence of it beneath tens of thousands of feet of water. Well, my friends, that does not compute, because as we go along and take from these ancient records and archaeologists and from this colonel's report here, that he went all over Asia, and he went over India and into Africa, and it seems like one of the main headquarters of that ancient civilization of Mu was here in the Americas. Now, also, I think one of the factors that he didn't go into a great deal of trouble to research the Mayans. I believe that they, with their ancient solar calendars and the Aztecs and so forth, that they were cousins, that they were descendants. They had the great Herodian nose, just like the Edomites and the Canaanites, that you find on the stone slabs and the archaeological records, that they were one of the same people of Edom, of Mars, of Mu, Lemura, Atlantis. Let's go on and see if we can figure out who they are. But you see, all right, you can understand why a few, many decades ago, let's say 50 or 100 years ago, that they would have to go with an assumption, yet they deduced, as they went along and they examined these records, they found that they had what they called air cars. They go on to say that the children of Mu, that they became the most influential people on the earth, which according to, now get this, what a clown, this Darwin, that man was still closely related to the monkeys. No, I believe he was mistaken. I think Darwin was related to a jackass. Now, they also believed, I think I said this, that the America was one of the first colonies of Mu. Now remember, colonies. We've already stated and pointed out, and there's other people before me have proved it, that it was thousands of years ago the North American continent was invaded by the Asiatic. That he was here and lived here in this great land, and the predominance of these peoples that peopled this land and indigenous to it, when Columbus and Leif Erikson, prior to him, landed on this continent, they found there was all kinds of different peoples living here, and we've been stuck with this idiot word, Indians. You see, he thought he had landed in India. But anyway, there was all different types of Indians and the civilized tribes and the great descendants of the great ancient Asiatic Mongolian hordes that came across through the Bering Straits and down through the steppes of Russia and Alaska into the North American continent here. And these people were, there was such a difference in racial characteristics that even a blind man could figure that out. But the ancient records show us that these children of Mu, that they had an incredible sophisticated government, flowering of culture and science and technology, and we find that evidence has been found, as I said just a while ago, that indicates that they flew in what they call lighter-than-air machines. So you see, as I've said before, the end of a circle is the beginning of the circle, and here they are now today. They're trying to make all these anti-gravity things. And why is the merchants of this world, why are the one-worlders, why are all the money people, why are they spending millions and billions and trillions of your time since the 40s, and going back to Erich von Braun and so forth? Why have they been so interested in getting into outer space? Because they know in their secret schools they are taught that they are fugitives and that they are vagabonds, and they were cast out of the heavens, cast out of the headquarters of the house of God, if you like, and that they here upon the earth they must have a seed, a generation that can go back to this house of light or the house of the tree of life and once again learn and understand and regain immortality, so that they may come back like the Messiah of 2,000 years ago to raise up their progeny and their dead and reinstitute their people and try to take over the heavens and the house of God. It was back in the right at the end of the Second World War. I probably shouldn't bring this up. I was reading quite an interesting article about one of the Russian officers was talking to one of our officers in the American Army. He said, now, let's say that your communism spread throughout the whole world and the whole world became communistic. What would you do? Now we're talking to a man who is coming from an atheistic society and is a Russian officer. He's supposed to be an atheist and so forth. He said we'd go up to heaven and get God next. Now you think that's a joke? You think he was trying to be blasphemous? No, there is a reality to this that they have kept from us, who they consider nothing more than the thundering, unwashed herd. Now we find that as we study let's say, this James Churchward, he wrote 3 different books about this, the world's most extraordinary mystics and scientists of great antiquity. He wrote 3 different ones. One of them was entitled The Children of Mu. Another one was entitled, The Sacred Symbols of Mu, and The Lost Continent of Mu. And as I maintain, he made the erroneous error, like so many other people who've donned in, those that wrote upon Atlantis. They assume that it's a continent that is submerged beneath the waves of the Atlantic or the Pacific out there. Yes, there's a possibility that as land shifts and the crust of the earth changes and the movement of lands, that there's continents possibly suddenly dropped off and disappeared. It doesn't make sense to me, but there is that possibility. Now, what I would like to get back to discussing is I would like to relate and bring out the fact that some of the writings of the tablets that this man uncovered, and in his day and age with this priest of India, he was able to decipher some of these tablets. But after he got the gist of it and the flow of it, he found that he described here the Vignette. Now listen closely. He said it was a fine, straight, horizontal lines. It was a symbol, now get this, for space. Now those of you who get this tape, this edition, if I fail to send it along, you write back and remind me, and I will photostat these lines so you can see them with your own eye, and I'll get them back to you. Now, as we're going to find that in some of this ancient symbolism, remember I told you that the dragon and the serpent throughout even our scriptures is synonymous. It's symbolic. My God, some of the pictures this man put out and reproduced from these ancient tablets correlated with what you already know and understand from the background that has preceded these talks. You'll be able to become enlightened and get an overall picture, I believe, that you'll find astounding, to say the least. But we find that these ancient peoples, they used the symbolism of the dragon, which tied in, and I came across in some of these very rare old books of his, it showed this great dragon called Quetzalcoatl that was protecting some of these ancient North American Indians, which we pointed out, which means a man from Venus, Quetzalcoatl, and it shows by the symbolism he came from a fiery dragon that breathes fire, a great spaceship. Now, in the what they call the Vignette, one of his pictures here, which I'll send along, it symbolized the 7-headed serpent moving in space. The surrounding circle, then, is the universe. In other words, he's talking about a serpent ship, that not only could he surround, it was talking about the 7-headed serpent. Now remember, listen closely. We go back to, let's see, what was it, Job? From your Farrar Fenton Bible. Man, if you haven't got one, get one. The Almighty said to Satan, "Where have you been?" He said, "I've been flying over the earth and on the earth, and going to and fro." Because allegorically, get the symbolism of the Almighty, why, if the devil was just ruling this world, why would he ask him where he had been? In the Father's house there are many mansions. And I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt this Satan, this devil, this great extraterrestrial, powerful, wisdom, full of wisdom, serpent, this great captain, another great lord of space that rebelled against his heavenly Father, and your father and mine. Maybe this sucker was our brother. This rebellious fellow. Then, so, right here, from the ancient writings of Mu, is it telling us that he was in charge of 7 planets. Or, here's another possibility as we read Revelations. Christ talked about in his right hand he had 7 stars. Now, a lot of people, and I mean one of the finest scholars in this world that ever lived, he's dead now. And he pointed out this was the 7 churches in the church age. Now, there is many times, like I had a fellow one time, he used the allegory of a jewel that looked like a diamond. It went back to the ancient rhombohedric, and it spoke about the many sides and facets of a diamond. And so, a lot of times, when they speak to us in an idiom or a parable, it has many different facets, and it also can be applicable to different people down through different ages and time periods. But without dwelling on that, let's go on. In other words, this symbol, it showed this 7-headed serpent. In other words, he was the head of 7 something. I believe 7 worlds. And the surrounding circle is the universe, he said. Now, in what he calls the Vignette 2, he shows these wavy horizontal lines, symbol for earthly waters, he said. But, forgive me for taking issue with this man. Because like you sing in the churches, it's a new day, it's a new age, it's a day of light and glory and of victories to be won. Victories to be won in the form of new knowledge and new understanding. One of my son-in-laws who took Hebrew, and please don't ask me which translation or what edition, but as he told me in the beginning of Genesis, it said the Elohim, meaning the gods, the sons of God, if you like. Should we play church? It said, and they created the universe. Well, let's take you and say, what did they create out here in the universe? And it said, well, whatever they created, these worlds, it said they created them by vibrations. Now, I'm not scientific enough. I know that there's tens upon tens upon tens of thousands of multiple oscillating waves. You have TV waves, and you have radio waves and gamma rays, and well, let's just quit right there. But through these waves, bringing things into existence, was he talking about science and energy? Because we know that also he points this out in the waves. But remember before, when no, not Cortez, the one before him. Anyway, the Spaniard came in, they kept saying Viracocha, Viracocha. And they were talking about he who comes upon the waves of the sea of space, and he's equated to the little white foam cap upon this waves. And so if you look off into the great sea of space, as the Indians of the Americas, the Aztecs, Toltecs, Mayans, Incas, the Egyptians, the Moors, the Atlanteans, the Lemurians, and the Akkadians, God, I hope I haven't left anybody out, as they would look off into space and looking for an allegory so that your carnal earth friend had never seen one. Like we say we see one of these spaceships that looked like a saucer, or others say it looked round like a balloon, or it looked like a kid's top. There's been all different types of descriptions of them, but they had to equate it to something that they knew and understood. So anyway, he goes on, this figure number 3 here. He said this circle is a picture of the sun. The sun was a collective symbol of all the attributes of the deity. Now, I have to take issue with that. There is a two-edged sword here. We pointed out in Revelation. The book of Daniel in the 12th chapter. And you better keep this in mind. He said, to those who have brought many to righteousness. That means understanding of the law, scientific laws, biblical laws, and those who have the courage and the intestinal fortitude to keep these laws. He said, you will shine with the brightness of the sun and the moon and the stars, and all glories are not of the same glory. Now, Cain was called, among many things, the great Khan. He was called the sun god. And he supposedly slew the people called Seth, not a singular man, but he killed them in the field. It was in the field of battle. It was talking about a great hordes, armies, a world destroying another one. And he never mentioned him. He tried to wipe out all records of him, showing the people that he was the true descendant of the great gods, Adam and Eve. But Adam, if you go back and read, somewhere in the 8th chapter of the book of Genesis, it says, and Adam had a son called Seth. See, in the ancient idioms and the allegory, it shows that this great Khan and these people, they were a half-breed people. They were crossed angelic beings with terrestrial, a lower caste people of whoever they were. We're still confused by this. Nobody really knows for sure. But he constantly called himself the sun god and ties it in. Oh, I could go into all this 666 and the sun worship and all of this. This is why today we have the people committing blasphemy and they're keeping the Sabbath as Sunday. But I better avoid that, and I don't want anyone to think I'm a Jovi or a Seventh-day Adventure or any of those things. And somebody might say, well, you shouldn't insult those people. Well, they're not going to listen to me anyway. Their mind's made up. They're full of religion. Then we find here in this set of drawings that I have in the 4th figure, it shows the sun with its rays coming down onto what it looks like an altar, whatever. It shows very fine vertical lines from the sun symbolizing his forces, which are affinitive to the earth's light force, which being set in movement gives light upon the earth. Figure 5, it shows the vertical wave lines from the sun. It symbolizes the sun's forces, which are affinitive to the earth's heat force. They meet and the earth's heat force becomes active. In picture number 6, he shows little vertical dotted lines from the sun symbolize his forces, which are affinitive to the earth's life force. And then he has a 6b. It symbolizes the sun's affinity force striking the earth's life force in cosmic eggs, which are in the water and bringing them into life. Now we went back, and I want to remind you, when we quoted to you, from the book The Two Babylons, where they showed a great steel egg that rode the waters and landed up on the beach. And out of it stepped the Queen of Heaven. See, long lost to us, Kaveh, Eve, the mother of all living, they translated erroneously in Genesis. Many of your Bible scholars point that out. This was added in much later by a transcriber. And some of them called that Queen Ishtar, which was one of the ancient names for Venus. All right. Now, then there's also here in their figure number 7 the geometrical symbol that was assigned to by the ancients of Mu. It also had the heretic letter M, and it reads Mu, Ma, mother, land, field, country, and mouth. See, this was his understanding. All right? Now, the interesting thing about that, and bear with me, I think we're going to prove it by his own discovery, the geometrical symbol here. Mu, Ma, mother, land, field. Remember, Cain slew Abel in the field. Land, I told you, mistranslated from the word eratz, meaning that globe, world. Now also, here's a mouth. Refers mouth. You open your mouth, something comes out of the mouth. Remember John of Revelation, he said there was 3 doors on the north, 3 on the south, 3 on the east, 3 on the west. It's talking about the motherland. These ancient people of Mu. We don't know that in the beginning that all of these people were evil, whether they are Adamic or whether they're Asiatic or whether they're black. They all, in the beginning, everything was very good, according to the records of the Almighty. Now, we get to this number 8. We have a thing that looks like a T. Pardon me. Visualize the usual symbol of the so-called Christian cross. I'm not being blasphemous. I'm not tearing down any Christians. But, my friends, you're going to find here from the ancient records of Mu and the pre-Diluvian people that this symbolic cross, in many shapes and forms, has been around long before the Nordic, or the Norsemen, the Danish, or the Danites, or any of these Adamic people ever got about. These other ancient peoples had it. Or maybe somewhere shrouded way back in antiquity, it was created by and for the Adamic man. But why should we argue over this? So take that cross and you knock the top off of it. In other words, you just have a regular T. And that was called the Ta. And it was the symbol of resurrection in Mu. It is the picture of the collection, it is the picture of the constellation, the Southern Cross. Now, you remember, we've covered a lot of astronomy, not astrology. The Ta also, according to the Colonel, it was symbolizes bringing forth, emerge, and etc. Now, permit me, I'm going to look this up, and I'm going to read a parallel thing from Job, if you like. Well, first of all, we're running close on time here without wasting a whole lot of your time, but you remember what Jeremiah said, back quoting from the 4th chapter of Jeremiah. We talked about men were driven from among men and etc. and all that. I didn't cover that well enough. You go back and read that chapter. But allow me to quote to you from Job, the 30th chapter. Who's they? We can go back here, let's see, Job, the 15th chapter. The Almighty's talking to Job, and the 15th chapter and the 7th verse, Art thou the first man that was ever born, or wast thou made before the hills? Is he talking about the worlds? He's talking about his species, his kind. And here's something very discouraging, even way back then in these dark ages of antiquity, the 15th verse. Behold, he putteth no trust in his saints. Remember what I said, saints, santos, believing offspring? Yea, the heavens are not clean in his sight. We go to the 30th verse of Job and the 5th verse, and he says they were driven forth from among men. We're talking about, who's this Bible about? The main character is Adam, called the Adon. And he talks about the sheep, the goats, the hogs, the dogs, and the serpent. These are different types of men that are equated to animals. Even you, my dear saints, we're called the sheep, the flock of his pasture. So, they were driven from among men, the Adamites, the odd dawn. They cried after them as after a thief. It goes on to say, to dwell in the cliffs of the valleys, and the valleys of the earth, and in the rocks. Are you sure that's what it means? Now listen, verse 7. Among the bushes they brayed, and under the nettles they were gathered together. They were the children of fools, yea, the children of base men. They were viler than the earth. Now, what I'm trying to say, the point I'm trying to make, are these the children of Mu that were driven out to dwell in the bushes? If a planet is a tree, a smaller planet is a bush. All right, we go back in the 38th chapter of Job, when it says, it starts out in the first verse, it talks about this great Lord of space. He answered Job out of the whirlwind. Now, verse 4, he says, where wouldst thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare it if you understand. The 7th verse, he talks about when the morning stars sang together and all of the sons of God shouted for joy. Let me bring it up again and remind you in the 9th verse. He said, I made the cloud, the garment thereof, and thick darkness, a swaddling for it. A lot of you people don't remember, but even when I was a young boy, I remember my youngest brother, they used to take and fold up like a diety, and they'd put it around my brother's belly, and they'd take a pin and pin it in, and they called that a swaddling band. Even back then, that was to keep your navel or belly button, if you like, from protruding or coming out. All right, so as we pointed out, the scientists have pointed out, and the apocryphal writings point out, that this Venus, this house of God, that's covered with an overcoat of clay, and it has darkness about it. And in other words, some say and speak of, as we've pointed out in past days, thick, swaddling bands of clouds. And this is why we had this space probe up there trying to see through it. And it's funny how all their equipment kept shutting off, and they got just a very small percentage of Venus. Now he goes on to say, the darkness, the swaddling band for it, and broke up for in my decreed place, and set bars and doors. And we described what those are, and if you don't remember, go back and list those old tapes, or get yourself a good Strong's Concordance. And the verse 11 he said, thereunto shall thou come, but no farther, and shall thy proud waves be stayed. You remember what the man in this ancient writings of Mu talked about, the waves? The waves. Oh, isn't this good? It's talking about people. The great waves of people. You imagine the size of this earth and its so-called population explosion. Yes, the heathen are exploding all over the place. But he's talking about something up there, and I want to remind you once again, John said, and I saw 12 foundations. Today we would say that building had 12 floors, or that satellite had 12 floors, and you flatten them out throughout, or however it's made, like a corkscrew inside, let's say, of all different levels. Do you realize the millions upon millions and millions of people that you could fit in there? And I think if we go back and we had the time to study Ezekiel, it talks about the different people and their spaces and their quarters and so forth. And then not only that, but it seems to be an area, a great gigantic area for landing strips in there, if you like. And he goes on to say, hast thou commanded the morning? We're talking about the morning star. Since thy days, commanded it. He's talking about a spaceship that he, this great Lord of space, he was in control of, and he was the commander. Like Christ said in Revelation 22:16, he said, I am the bright and morning star. I am in command of this great ship. Hast thou commanded the morning star since thy days, and caused the day spring to know his place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, and the wicked might be shaken out of it. Aha! Shaken out of it. Where these people of Mu, Lemur, Atlantis, and all of these other great ancient fable places, and these men and places of renown, were they not the ones that got their butt kicked out of it? He said he had driven Cain, the great Khan, and his armies. He drove them off the face of the earth. What earth? What planet? Where? But, and also, don't forget, there was a lot of people in the cities of the planets of Adam and the Eve people. They were driven off too. And you were the children, you were the offspring of that fallen remnant. He told us back in Job, he told us in Jeremiah and throughout Genesis that he would not make a full end of us, just like he told Moses he was so vexed and ticked off of the sorry bunch of people that we are. He said that he was going to destroy all of us, and Moses said, you can't do that. You got to honor your word. You gave them to me. You put me in charge. You're going to kill anybody, and you want to get over your temper, kill me. Thank God for Moses. Thank God for the Christ and the Savior who came to redeem us, who to restore us to the heavens. And I mean the heavens and the great white, widespread household of the Almighty, that we might learn a great lesson and take forth justice throughout the universe. What did I read there a while ago? And he said to Job, even the heavens are not clean. This earth is not the only place that's full of a sorry bunch of bastards, and I mean bastard mamzars. Those are the mixed fallen angelic peoples, those fallen would-be gods or the sons of God who came down and bred with the daughters of men, the Enosh. Get your concordance out. Just look up under men. See how many different varying types of them that there are. Now let's go back. 38 and 14. It is turned as clay to the seal, and they stand as a garment. This great space satellite is covered over what is described as clay, but it's a sulfur-type mixture. Even our science... Well, that's the end of our tape. I'm afraid we'll catch you on the next one. Write to us, Pilgrim Ships, P.O.